Welcome to True or False. I'm your host, Jason A. Kessler, and today I want to talk about that time Lufthansa Airlines kicked all the Jews off a flight. Seriously, this story is insane. It's hard to believe it actually happened in 2022. So buckle up, put your tray tables in their upright position, and let's take off into this ridiculous story. Okay, so on May 4th, a Lufthansa flight arrived in Germany from New York. Many of the passengers were Jewish because apparently every year thousands of Hasidic Jews make an annual pilgrimage to a village in Hungary to visit the grave of a rabbi named Yeshaya Steiner. So picture around 150 or so Jews, most of them very recognizable as Jews, with the hats and the suits and the hair, all making their way through the German airport to a connecting flight to Hungary. But when they got to the gate, there were a whole bunch of armed German police officers blocking their way. None of the passengers knew what was going on, and everyone was confused, until the flight staff started calling out names of passengers one by one to let them board the connecting flight. Pretty soon people realized that Lufthansa was only boarding the non-Jews. In fact, at one point they called up a guy named Usher Schick, but once they saw him and realized he was one of the Jews, they turned him away. In the end, only 2 Jews made it on board the flight. Probably because they were in first class and they were dressed less Jewy than the others. One of them had a baseball cap instead of a yarmulke, and the other had a black polo shirt instead of a suit. With the non-Jews on board the flight to Hungary, the gate closed and the pilot took off, leaving the Jewish passengers behind at the airport with no good explanation. The plane should have been holding up to 192 passengers, and instead it took off with only around 20. The flight crew even asked some of the passengers to move to the back of the plane to even out the weight distribution because the plane was so empty. And get this, according to the 2 Jews who made it on the flight, the crew told them they could have as many kosher meals as they wanted because they had so many extra. By now you're probably wondering, okay, what the heck? There's gotta be some explanation, right? Why would they possibly kick all the Jews off the flight? Well, apparently some of the people on the flight from New York weren't wearing their masks like they were supposed to. Okay, but according to witnesses, there were just a few isolated incidents, and they included some Jewish passengers and some non-Jewish passengers. But instead of just blocking the specific people who broke the rules, Lufthansa decided the more reasonable thing to do was blame all the Jews and bar them all from the connecting flight. Here's a video of a supervisor explaining that since according to her it was Jews who caused the problem, that's why Jews had to pay the price.
My adult life has never heard of it. If you want to do it like this, Jewish people who were the mess, who made the problems.
Yikes. And remember, it's not like all the Jews were traveling together as part of the same group. They all just happened to be Jewish and were all headed to the same place for an annual pilgrimage that attracts thousands of Jews every year. It's like if a plane had a whole bunch of Muslims on their way to Mecca, or a whole bunch of Patriots fans heading to the Super Bowl, and the flight staff lumped them all together for collective punishment for the acts of only a few. It's appalling. Now, if you're wondering how we know all the details of what happened, we all have to give major props to dansdeals.com, which broke the story and did a ton of incredible investigative work, including interviewing many of the passengers involved. Yeah, because sadly, if we want the news to cover a case of egregious anti-Semitism, we apparently need to rely on a blog about frequent flyer miles. So, whose fault is all of this? Who made the call? According to one of the gate agents, the captain of the flight to Hungary is the one who decided he didn't want any of the Jews on his plane. That pilot is awful. He should be punished. In fact, you know what? We should round up all pilots and punish all of them. Maybe stick them in cramped little cages and serve them nothing but tiny packets of pretzels or something. No, obviously I'm just kidding. Not all pilots are bad people. My ex-girlfriend's dad is a pilot for Southwest and he's awesome. Judging all pilots for the sins of one pilot would obviously be dumb and wrong. That's literally the definition of prejudice, prejudging all members of a group based on your own bias. And I can't believe I even have to explain this in 2022. Now, to be fair, Lufthansa did release an apology. Oh, not for kicking off all the Jews. They apologized because their slogan, "Say yes to the world," is a little deceptive. But don't worry, they fixed the situation and updated their slogan. Okay, fine, that's obviously a joke. Lufthansa did eventually release an actual apology, but it really didn't help. Their apology said, A large number of booked passengers were denied boarding on their connecting flight, and that Lufthansa regrets the circumstances surrounding the decision to exclude the affected passengers from the flight. But the thing is, the apology doesn't mention the word Jews anywhere. And even worse, take a look at this line. We regret that the large group was denied boarding rather than limiting it to the non-compliant guests. The large group? They were a bunch of Jews who didn't know each other. You're the one who lumped them all together and judged them as one big group just because they're all Jewish. Even your apology exposes your biased perspective. But you know what? It's all good. Everything's fine, because since all of that happened, the CEO of Lufthansa finally did something. He reached out to the rabbi of Berlin's Jewish community to apologize. Because why not pick a random Jew who had nothing to do with the incident and apologize to him? The Berlin rabbi can just tell the rest of us at the next Jew meeting, since, we're all part of one big group. Yeah, that's our show. Lufthansa, do better. And see you next week.